Joe, let's go to Ebola. You had some pretty tough words on Friday about government response and your own personal concerns. What you've heard from Dr. Frieden and Dan Pfeiffer, you feel any better than you did Friday?
No, I don't feel better, and I don't think most Americans feel better. You have everybody saying, hey, let's stay calm. That's what the World Health Organization said back in the spring when this broke out. And then they said, let's stay calm. And the head of Doctors Without Borders, as the Washington Post reported this morning, went to him in late July and said, this is a crisis. They said, you're panicking. You're panicking. And we're hearing the same thing now. Let's look at it. The World Health Organization has been dismal. They've ignored all of the warning signs. And then the African countries, the governments there, have failed miserably. And right now, a lot of Americans are seeing what happened in Dallas and looking at your laundry list. Yeah. What happened with the Secret Service? What happened with the IRS? What happened with the VA? What happened with ISIS being a JV team? So when anybody, any member of the government says, hey, just relax, everything's going to be okay, Americans don't believe that.
Yeah, Andrew.
And in fact, it's that laundry list, it's more and worse here, because in Dallas, look what happened. The man comes into the ER. He tells a nurse he was in West Africa, in Liberia. They initially blame it on a computer system where the nurse doesn't call the ER doctor. Now they acknowledge it wasn't the computer system at all, that the doctor on the case had the same information. People are not communicating. And this is after we were told by the government, by the CDC, by the White House, that doctors and hospitals around the country were prepared. One thing now, though, they now begin to realize that I'm told by sources that they are now going to consider strongly having screening, and they don't have the personnel. CDC doesn't have the personnel, but they now believe if they go to a small number, 4 main airports, they can get about 75% of the people coming in.
JFK, Dulles, O'Hare, Newark, those 4 airports they can hit. 75% of incoming West African.
You cannot trust people to be asked a questionnaire at the port of departure in Africa.
If you have a 6-year-old daughter and you're in West Africa and you think she may have Ebola, are you going to answer the question honestly? Or are you going to come to the United States? I'm coming to the United States to try to save my daughter.
I have a couple of different questions here. One is whether systems broke down, and it's clear that you can look at isolated systems and say they broke down. It's one thing for the U.S. to say we're going to send all of these mobile military hospitals to set up in Monrovia, but it turns out there's no infrastructure there to get them set up. There's systems that break down. But the question you're asking is whether it's the term that Dr. Frieden used, the index of suspicion, whether that expands to everything. I don't know that Americans turn and automatically look to their government and say, fix this the way we think they do. If they're suspicious of government in all these other ways, then they also aren't expecting government to have,
well, they're suspicious.
What's just one thing. One case of Ebola in the United States, right? One. 3,000 people dead in West Africa, which we were talking about last week. So all of a sudden we are panicked.
And by the way, every warning case, every case, well, we don't, and obviously we have a map issue.
One case is a tipping point.
And everyone is connected.
I'm sorry, it's growing into such a level in West Africa that now is when you would start to, as Kent Brantley said, a guy who knows something about this because he had it, he said this is a fire from hell, and if you think that the Atlantic Ocean is going to stop it from coming over here, you're kidding yourself.
David, I
don't want to disagree with Dr. Scarborough, but
no,
I understand.
Okay.
But here's Tom Frieden, Tony Fauci at the NIH. These are public health professionals of world-class standing. They have no motivation to mislead the American people. They've dealt with many epidemics before, many health issues before. I don't think there's a reason to believe that they're not doing what needs to be done. And I will say this about the jaundice issue. I sat on this said it wasn't as nice, but in the spring of 2010, and we talked about the oil leak in the Gulf, and everyone said, this is Obama's Katrina, things are out of control, the government's broken down. You know, it wasn't even mentioned in the 2012 election because ultimately it was dealt with. So I suggest we look back 6 months from now.
No, I understand.
And review this discussion. And I suspect what we're going to say is, gee, that wasn't what we thought.
But the problem, right, for the White House right now is they have to make sure people don't panic because we can't have our public health facilities flooded. I mean, I brought up flu season for a reason because the symptoms are almost identical and we could see a total
crush
What
on
is
the
our,
system.
what is our responsibility in creating and fomenting?
Well, that's...
But the government,
What's our
one second,
responsibility,
guys.
though, in asking questions? I don't understand the Dr. Scarborough comment. I'll be really honest with you. This is a serious issue. I'm quoting people that have Ebola, that have spent time in West Africa.
When people like you and people like us go on television and say, this is far worse than they're saying, this is a reason to get, this is a reason to be
Okay, guys.
then people respond to it.
David,
I'm gonna hit-
what I was saying is, we
the
have
pause
to
button,
ask
Joe.
tough questions.
I think Chuck just asked tough questions, actually. I thought he did a pretty good job.
Let's do the pause button, because you guys have plenty of work. We're going to come back. We can continue this discussion.
Chuck, we're trying to help all four of you.
Yeah, I hear you.